song and music is the mightiest influence in all the world. The Bible has much to say about song. Paul and Silas in jail at Philippi, still bloody and beaten, sang. Christ sang in the upper room with his disciples in that momentous occasion of the Last Supper, sang with them. But there come times when it's very difficult for us to sing. There come difficult times in our lives. And such a time is portrayed in the 137th Psalm. So if you'll turn to the book of Psalms there in the Old Testament, those 150 Psalms, toward the end, the 137th Psalm. They're written about the children of Israel, telling of a time when singing was difficult. I just want to read through those verses with you as we get the mood of those particular individuals. Psalm 137, beginning with verse 1. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, lest on my right hand forget our cunning. And then it goes on down and describes the agony that these children of Israel were undergoing as they were captives in a strange land. Jerusalem had been destroyed. Now, for us to figure in our life what Jerusalem means, there would be nothing that could compare with it. We could say coming to church, but not really. There was not the devotion. There was not the attachment. The same as they looked at Jerusalem and as we look at church or our cities or such. The walls and the gates had been destroyed. Solomon's great temple, of which they were so proud, that represented everything about their religion, including the sanctuary, had been destroyed. You see, they had this sanctuary service out of which they worshiped with the holy place in the most holy place and such. And sometimes we forget that when they had the temple, that the sanctuary services continued on. They were in the temple. They were in the temple building. They had lost all of that. And most of the inhabitants of Jerusalem were taken captives and slaves. And Psalm 137 describes an incident as they are taken as slaves and captives to a foreign land, over to Babylon. This distressing time, they were sad. They were homesick. And one prominent feature of their worship service was music and song, and they missed it. We have a tendency in our day and age to figure out exactly what it is that we think song and music is in our church services. And across this land of ours and across this world of ours, there are various cultures and various people. And they mix together in a very nice way in America in particular. And we decide that certain musical instruments are not kosher or permissible in the house of worship in one section of the world, or America, and another one we say it's okay. We say certain types of singing are permitted here and not. Some people would have drums within the worship service. Some people would equate drums with the mark of the beast. Some people think trumpets. Some people think violins, guitars, operatic singing, classical music, you name it. As we talk about music and things like that, we have decided of what we think is kosher and right and good and what is not. And I find it very interesting to compare how we have decided that to what they actually did in the Bible. And you read about all those various instruments that they used and the song and the chants and things as they worship within their worship service. Music was very much a part of it. And here the fame of their temple music of that day had spread abroad. And as they were taken captives, the request came of them, would you sing us one of those songs of Zion, those songs about which you are so famous? And their answer, I want to talk to you on a few brief moments this morning. Their answer was, how shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? How are you going to expect us to be happy when our hearts are broken? How can you expect us to sing in the plight that we're in? And this picture out of the past is but a lesson for us as God's people today. We are to sing. We are to sing, though in distress we may be. Do you like to sing when you're sad? Do you like to raise your voice in praise when you've just gotten creamed as it is? Not too popular, is it? When we stop singing, when this joyous music that's inside of our hearts stops singing, when it stops happening, something happens to us. Now, I can't sing. Anybody knows me knows that's true. People try to make me feel better about it by saying that you don't sound too bad. But nobody's mentioned good yet. But when I stop singing, I've got to sing somewhere. So you want me to preach here and not sing, so I sing in showers, I sing going down the road in the car. Nobody bothers me there. I can sing it. We must keep singing, and when we stop singing, and when I get to the point in my experience that I can no longer sing, then trouble starts. And amongst God's people, when the singing stops, dissension starts. Yes, when the praise and singing stops. When the singing stops, attending church starts slacking off. When the singing stops, reading and praying stop. When the singing stops in our lives, our spiritual condition and our mental condition go sharply downhill. Have you experienced it? These Hebrew people, because they were in captivity, because they were in a strange land as slaves, they decided to stop singing. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? So we're not going to sing. And they quit. And years later, when deliverance came and they had the opportunity to go back to the promised land, to that same temple that meant so much to them, to rebuild it, to go back, only 1 in 7 went back because they became foreignized. They became conformed. You see, we must sing. We must let the praise of our heart come out in song. We are to sing on for 2 reasons. First, for our own sakes. We need to sing to keep our own mentality going. Have you ever done that? Have you sang just to make sure you didn't lose your mind? And in the trouble that comes our way, in the difficulties, in the personalities, in the conflicts, and everything else that happens, somehow if we can get ourselves to sing in the middle of that, we stay on top of it. But when we don't, we go under. And then we not only need to sing for ourselves, our own sakes, but we need to sing for others' sakes. Whether they like to hear the music or not, we need to sing. And they need to hear us singing. We would all acknowledge that God chastens at times. Does He? Has God ever chastened you? Or shall I use the modern terminology, has God ever spanked you? God used His spanking whip on anybody this week? I'm not painting a big bad God that pops it on us. But God, the Bible speaks about God chastening us. When He does it, do we sing? Do we act like Paul and Silas when they were chastened, when they were hit with the whips? Or do we ascribe that, well, everything came to us, came from Satan, and God decided not to keep Satan from bringing it to us, and we sort of use the lips a little bit in something else that's not involved in singing. It's called, how you do, pouting? You know, it's amazing. People that don't sing, sometimes their lower lip sticks out further than the end of their nose. That's hard with me, but it's something that happens to us. Paul and Silas, when they were in jail, sang. In fact, they sang, and I find it very interesting what happened when they sang. The jailer came to them when they sang, and you remember the question that he asked? What must I do to be saved? What must I do to be saved? How long since someone asked you or me the question, what must I do to be saved? I'm in a lost condition. I'm not right with God. I want to be saved. What must I do to be saved? Or could it be because of the way we react to the sufferings that come to us that they don't believe that we know the answer to the question? That's the danger of not singing. That's the danger of not keeping the praise upon our lips, that individuals would look at us and determine that it's no use in asking them what I must do to be saved. Obviously, they don't know. The favorite song of those in England during the war, and we talk about the war and First and Second World War and such, and we wonder, people wonder in history, how did England survive with all of that turmoil and all of this seemingly going down the tube in the war? How did they do it? And we look at Winston Churchill and others and we say great leaders led them and else, but I'm persuaded to believe that song had a lot to do with it. You remember the favorite song in England? There Will Always Be an England. They continued to sing that in spite of the fact that it looked like armies would overwhelm them. What silenced the singing of those Hebrew people there in Psalm 137? Adversity? Adversity and prosperity, two seemingly opposite things, can stop singing. Adversity, hard times, and I can't but think of a better example of those who sing in hard times than Paul and Silas. You remember they were in jail. And I looked for an illustration that out of common everyday life that I could use, and I couldn't come up with anything better than the example given right there in Scripture of Paul and Silas. These two men were preaching. They were teaching what they believed. And they were getting together, and the people didn't like what they said. And that happens when you preach. That happens a lot when you teach, when you preach what is true. People don't like what you say, and they took them and they beat them, and they put them in jail, and they put stocks or handcuffs around their ankles and around their wrists, and they had them chained down there. And at midnight, in the middle of the night, with all that in that dark dungeon and everything else, they begun to sing. It says they sang. Great example, isn't it? Now, I'll tell you something. I have a hard time singing at midnight. I don't mean when the clock strikes midnight, but I mean in the midnights of my experience. I have a hard time singing. My tendency is I'd rather murmur. I'd rather feel sorry for myself. But there's no room in praise singing for feeling sorry for ourselves. You might ask the widow with the children, how does she sing? And she might say to you, I sing because my husband's gone and I'm left here with these kids and these children cling, and I must sing for their sakes, not just for my own. The message this morning is that song and praise are very much a part of the Christian experience. How about it in your life? Now, let me just ask you to think about this past week, about instances that have happened in your life. Things that have happened to you, not that you liked. I'm not talking about that. Things that you didn't like. Anything happened in your life? You want to raise your hand and tell me anything that happened in your life this week that you didn't like? No, don't do it, okay? Because I'm trying desperately to get out of here without going all day. But things happen in our lives that we don't like. Things happen that don't go the way we thought they should go. Those things happen. What do we do about it? Do we keep singing? If we do, it will be a tonic force and inspiration to us and to those around us. You see, I happen to believe that the Bible teaches us that there's an obligation of God's children to be a witness to those around them. And that witness quickly stops when we don't sing. I don't find Job, another example in the Scriptures, stopping singing, do you? Boils, all kinds of difficulties, what did Job do? I know that my Redeemer liveth. I can just picture him singing it, sitting there, all that sadness of those sackcloth and ashes and the boils on him, singing, I know that my Redeemer liveth, and when he comes again, he's going to find me. I'm going to live there without this trouble that I've got now. John Milton wrote, who best can suffer, best can do. The things that happen to us equip us to sing better. Just as someone who learns to sing, practice means a lot. The young lady sang before us this week. It's obvious she's practiced before she sang. We practice, we get it down perfect, we get that note just down, just right. We get that song, we memorize the song, and then when we sing and people enjoy it because they hear the repetition of what we have practiced. So it is in the Christian life. We are to sing praises, and when we don't do it, sad things happen. You see, I'm persuaded to believe that what the Bible teaches us about song and what these Hebrew children failed to understand was what God was seeking to do is through the adversities that they were in, or whether it didn't matter what was happening, that He was teaching them to sing, and if they could practice the singing in adverse circumstances, if they could practice the singing when things weren't as they like, just think what they could be like when it was going good. If you can practice singing when the congregation is booing you, just think how good you could do if the congregation is cheering you. Makes a drastic difference. How is our song in these days? Do you have a song? Talks about the 144,000 in the last days. They sing a song that no one else can sing. Why can't anybody else sing the song? Because nobody else has been through what they've been through. That's why they can sing the song. And they sang that song not on the sea of glass there in the book of Revelation as it describes it. They didn't sing that song there on the sea of glass. They won't sing that song on the sea of glass because that's where they practiced it. No, they practiced it down here. They sang down here in the midst of all the troubles and the tribulations that those 144,000 went through. They sang and they sang and they sang, and therefore when they stood on the sea of glass, they didn't have to learn a new song. They already knew it. And their song, if you look it up in the book of Revelation, look it up this afternoon and see what the song was. It was a song of praise and deliverance. And that's what our song will be if we sing it in the times in which we live.
Jesus found me, touched my